Greetings, friends. It is I, Jake, here to teach yet another board game. But it's been a while, so I thought I would get back into the practice because I aspire to do more of these in the not too distant future. Because friends of mine will be playing this game, I thought I would use this as an opportunity to try my hands at another tutorial how to play video. And the background here is that once upon a time, there was a game entitled Century Spice Roads, which is a very clever little deck building game, kind of. You're building a little machine in order to trade spices and purchase cards and end up with the most points. Well, this game was pitched as a trilogy, and the second one in its lineup is called Century Eastern Wonders, which takes that mechanical premise and builds upon it with kind of a modular map where you're doing a similar engine building, but you're more moving around a board than you are building a particular deck of cards. And while the third one is yet to come out, I still think it's pretty clever that at least these first two line up, if I can do this, into a nice little connection, which we can only hope that the third will even it out to a nice little triptych, as it were. So I would like to teach you Century Eastern Wonders. So the game gives instructions on how to set up your first game, but a fun part about this is that you can then, in later games, set it up however you want because each of these tiles is modular. And there are others left over, even blank ones, for you to play future games in whichever way you think is clever. The game then instructs you to take all these victory point tiles and shuffle them all up. Of course, omitting the closed port tile, obviously indicated by this X here. Setting that aside, shuffling up all these tiles, and then distributing one to each corner, like so. And by each corner, I mean each port. These little blank, little dock-looking things are referred to as ports. Then it instructs you to take all the remaining victory point tiles and shuffle them all up and take the top 5. Of course, face down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Add this one. Shuffle them all up with the closed port so that when they are all nice and shuffled, you stack them on the remaining victory point tiles, and the top 6 somewhere in there will be the closed port tile. And there we are. Placing the 6 that we had shuffled previously with the closed port tile somewhere in there, we place them on top, and we're ready to go with those victory point tiles. Now we move on to the bonus tiles. There are different types. The one you have to worry about sorting is that which is 6, 5, 4, and 3, having the highest value on top. But there are also other types with certain symbologies that will make sense later. Getting them all within easy reach of all players. Very nice. And now it comes time to shift our focus towards the player boards. Bringing it in a little bit, and we'll each player will be having one of these. Now we shouldn't mistake them for the flip side because this actually allows us to play with that other version of Century we were talking about before, the Spice Road, but we will play on the Eastern Wonders side exclusively. Now we're going to shuffle these all up based on how many people are playing, and whoever ends up with this symbol into the corner will be the first player. So we'll look at getting each player set up. Now, each player is going to choose their color of pieces. For this example, we'll choose the teal pieces, which are a bunch of outposts, and a single boat, which will navigate the board out here. But before we start playing, we have to get each of these outposts laboriously and meticulously placed on each little square of our player board. But believe me, it will be worth it. All right, so we did it. It was great fun. Meticulous, beautiful labor. But we also did a number of other things, including setting up the resource little bowls here that are in order from least to most valuable, or at least hardest to come by, which are ginger, chili, tea, and cloves. These will be resources throughout the game. Now, before we start the game, every player is entitled to their starting little hand from these 4 little pools. Now, this is the first player. Whoever is the last player gets the first choice. So they might decide to take the 2 chili here, and then player 3 decides to take the tea and the ginger, and then perhaps player 2 decides they want 4 gingers, leaving the first player to take the chili and 2 gingers. They place them on these spaces here. You see that you have a limited stockade of 10 of these resources. Now we'll bring our focus back to the game at large so that we can share how the actual player turn works. One thing I should also include, piggybacking on that whole aspect of limited stockades for your limited resources, there was one last bonus tile to include. These guys, which expand your capacity. Isn't that nice? All right, now we are ready to get into the nitty-gritty of how the game is actually played. When you take a turn, you may move, and then you must perform an action. So even if you don't move, you have to perform an action. So how does moving work? Well, you can take your little guy, your little boat, and move to any space connected to your current space for free. However, if you want to move more than one space, you have to leave behind some sort of resource from your stockade. So you could conceivably move any number of spaces across the board as long as you can afford it, but that might be expensive. Additionally, if I decide to move here and then move another space, leaving, of course, a resource behind and ending up in a space with an opposing player's boat, I have to give that player a resource. If there are multiple players, I have to give up that many resources, 1 to each player. Some other points about movement to make is that if you end your movement on a space, you get to take that resource. Isn't that nice? Gifts left behind from other players, you would think. However, if, for example, you decide to move onto a space and end with another player, you first have to make the payment to that player of the resource that we discussed just a second ago before you take the resource that you would have acquired from just ending on the space. So you got to pay it forward. And before you get too greedy, it's where you end your space is where you get to collect. You don't get one for every step of the way. That's just ridiculous. But, however, if there were multiple resources on a space where you ended your movement, you get all those. So that's nice. Now we get to the action that you must take regardless if you move. There are 3 possible actions: a market action, a port action, or a harvest action. Now, harvest is the simplest to explain, so we'll just get it out of the way. You just simply take 2 yellow cubes from the supply and add them to your cargo hold, meaning from the bowl, adding them to your player board. So you can always do at least that. Now, to get more into the strategy of the game, the market action is one that probably is the most common in terms of building up your little strategies, is where you place your little outposts that we had so meticulously placed before. All right, so here I am on the space I ended up, or stayed at, on my movement phase. I want to take the market action. I would like to place one of my outposts here. Well, the cost is the number of outposts from other players that are already there. So right now, it's free. However, if there were already an outpost from another player, I would have to pay 1 resource per outpost. And this, contrary to the whole movement payment instinct, this does not go to the player. It just goes back to the supply. It's like the tax to the land, to the system. If there were, of course, multiple outposts, I would have to pay multiple resources back to the supply, returning them to the bowls. However, since I'm the first one here and the first one to take dibs on putting an outpost here, I will do so. But there's a certain way you remove them from your player board. All right, here we are ready to place our first outpost. First, we must look at the space on which we were playing an outpost. And I don't know if you can see from here, but it is a cloves space. You can see better perhaps on this example here. There's a clove. Similarly, our space over here has that as well. So that means you will take from the cloves row the leftmost outpost and place it on that space. Now, as an incentive for distributing your outposts, when you have completed a vertical column, meaning one from each of the certain resources on the board, you then get to claim one of these special bonus tiles. This, of course, being worth 6 points at the end of the game. And this, of course, expanding your cargo hold that many spaces. And the other 3 require a little of explanation, but we'll do that right now. This one, as you can see, is the red cube of Chile. And when you take that harvest action, which, if you recall, gives you 2 of the yellow cubes, you can take a red cube as well. It's also worth 1 point. This is a nice one to have because, you know, I said you can move 1 space for free, and then you have to start paying resources behind you. This gives you an additional movement for free. This one is probably the most complicated, but it's still, easy enough to digest. That whenever you place an outpost, which we are in the process of doing, you also get to upgrade one of your resources for free. Upgrading meaning taking a yellow and making it a red, or taking a red and making it a green into a brown or a nutmeg, and so forth. It's also worth 2 points at the end of the game. These are all the same in each of the stacks except for the victory point tiles. While they aren't worth much in the course of the game, they are worth a lot at game's end. But 6 becomes 5, becomes 4, and so on. So now you know what you get when you clear off a column. You get first dibs on one of these 5 valuable bonus tiles. So now let's get back to the whole reason why we placed this outpost here in the first place. It's not just to, look cool and dominating over the board. It entitles us, once we have performed the market action, gotten to this location, placed our outpost, we can now perform this action, which also allows us on later turns to return to this space, and because we already have an outpost here, enable us to perform this market action. And it's a common symbology here, which basically says, take these resources in your supply and turn them into that. Of course, if you don't have this, you're not able to do this action. However, you can do this action as many times as you have in your supply. So if you have 2 yellow, 2 red, and 2 green, you can exchange all 6 of those for 4 brown. Why would you do this? Well, therein lies reaching these different victory point tiles, which therein lies the port action. On a later turn, if you reach the port tile and have the proper resources to claim this token, you do so, giving yourself that many points. And oh my gosh, isn't 17 a lot? You then take another tile from the supply, and if you remember, these top 6, somewhere in there, is the closed port tile. It's not the first one, though, so we replace that there, and the game continues. If, however, the closed port tile was drawn and placed, that corner of the board is now worth nothing. Now the game continues on this way, with each player moving about the board, placing their outposts for the market phase, claiming victory points, but each time a victory point tile is claimed after the closed harbor tile is revealed, that closed harbor tile goes to that new space that was just claimed, and then a new juicy victory point tile goes out on the board. And of course, the last action you can take is that when you're cornered, you can play the harvest phase and claim 2 of these guys, unless you've got a number of these guys, and then you get a number of these guys in addition. Now the game continues until a certain player has 4 of these victory tiles. The first player to do so triggers the game end condition. Then you finish the round, meaning all players get a turn until it gets back to the player who is player 1. Player 1 does not get a turn after that is triggered. And then we tally up the points. All right, so for this example, tallying up the final points, you get 1 point for every non-ginger, and ginger is yellow, ironically. So this player would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points in that regard. You also get the points for all of your victory point tiles that you earned throughout the game. This, I think, is the highest priority. You also get points for all of the uncovered spaces on your board. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's the numbers that are exposed. Plus any bonus tiles you would have acquired throughout the game. So in this example, 7 more. You tile them all up, and the player with the most points wins. So there you have it. And I think one thing I forgot to mention is that at the very beginning of the game, when you were each choosing which pool of resources you wanted, like the 4 of these or the 2 of that or the whatever, in reverse order, when you chose those, you also got to place your little boat figure guy anywhere you wanted on the board. So that was your initial placement. So you didn't have a designed spot. You just put it wherever you want to do. So yeah, I imagine, having never played this game before, and I think that's part of the exciting part about teaching a game before actually having a first-hand experience of it, is imagining how it would transpire. And I think this game is all about getting those outposts into a spot where you have first dibs and it's the most affordable, but also keeping your transportation costs low and building up this engine of being able to go to this spot, that spot, and the other spot to get the resources you want so that you can then make the dash toward that corner port and then getting those valuable resources. But then also knowing when to get that 4th one and triggering the last round of the game, because there's also the element of those bonus tiles, and those bonus tiles give you an edge, but if you spend too much time with the bonus tiles, you don't get any points, or at least minimal points, and how to balance the big payoff of points with the big payoff of extra abilities with the bonus tiles, I think is the exciting part of this game. So I'm looking forward to playing it, and I hope you are too. Thanks for watching.